how they're empowering their team, and really making sure that they're garnering the respect, not just because of title, but because of action and being more people forward. And so it's not always about bottom line production. If you drive people, people will drive process, and then you'll have the profits and the success you need. And so those type of leaders need to be more empathetic. And so people are more in tune with health and wellness. So those type of executive presence is not just from a strategic vision, leadership. I can set the plan and drive production or whatever it is, drive the mission, but how are you leveraging talent? How are you supporting your team from growth, internal mobility opportunities, technology, so they become more efficient as well? So all these different nuances and categories culminates kind of a better executive presence for that individual. Because again, it's just because you've reached that level doesn't mean you're a great people leader. Or these people following you based on title or based on the trust and value that you are as a leader and you pouring back into your team.
Hi, I'm Denise Chaffin, and I am your podcast host for Talking TA. And today I have with me Orlando Haynes, who is the Senior Talent Acquisition Leader, Career Empowerment Leader for the Mosaic Company. And Orlando also has his own CareerTALKS Podcast. Thank you, Orlando, for joining me. I look forward to our discussion. Before we jump in, we're going to talk a little bit about turning talent acquisition into business partners. Good discussion. But would you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Denise, for the opportunity. So yeah, I've been in TA for about 20 years or so, a little over 20 years. So I would say an old salty dog in the game. Currently, my role is with Mosaic as the North American Talent Acquisition Lead and Program Manager, which oversees our co-op program and talent pipeline creation for throughout North America. But I've worked for other global companies such as Amazon and in pods, et cetera, which I led TA teams across those strategies and talent pipeline and hiring initiatives.
Very good. Very good. And then how about your CareerTALKS podcast? When did you start
Yeah,
that?
so I started that about 4.5 years ago. So almost coming up on 5 years. And then, so that's all centered around providing actionable advice for your career in life to mid to senior level job seekers, as well as entry level folks who come in and can tune into my talks. I stream it live on LinkedIn and then redistribute those over to the podcast platforms. Then I do career coaching, authored a few books, and I do speaking across different platforms and organizations as well.
Awesome. Awesome. You all, I look forward to listening to a couple of your episodes. I just, like I said, joined a little while ago and following your CareerTALKS podcast. I think that's awesome. I love listening to other podcasters in our industry. Anyway, so let's jump into turning talent acquisition into business partners. I love that discussion. And I think that just with your background and what you're doing right now, I'm sure you've got some great tips and takeaways for our audience.
Yeah, so traditionally, well, my background is split too, which is, I think, gives me a good understanding. And a lot of peers of mine have a similar background where it started off in agency recruiting, and then we took the leap and jumped over to the corporate side. But what I've noticed is really the agency side is more transactional. Unless you're a strong recruiter and you build those relationships with those employers that you're trying to staff, you're really not embedded as much as you can be as a TA professional. Really doing the same function, but the title switch. But once you're on the corporate side, now you're really embedded in the culture, right? And so it's the day in and the day out to where you're really now starting to build a certain level of industry knowledge and expertise for the roles you're recruiting on. And so as a TA professional, how you can transition, some of the ways I've noticed throughout my careers is how do we partner with those managers, our VPs of HR, et cetera? Because everyone knows that, Denise, that TA becomes the scapegoat for a lot of things when it comes to the hiring process and meeting those hiring initiatives. And sometimes the folks at the top don't want to take responsibility in essence for, hey, maybe it's we're not meeting salary expectations, or the culture is not the best ideal fit, or we're seeing lack of internal mobility within the organization. The benefits are not as competitive in the market. And so some of those things are hard fights to fight. But I think for TA professionals, for the best way they can become more business partners versus transactional folks is really bringing more data to those conversations. And those conversations I'm talking about are really the intake meetings initially, right? So we know this cycle, your audience knows that cycle. When a requisition opens up from a manager, it's that point where the recruiter gets in touch, says, okay, let's talk through this and let's look at your so-called Christmas list, i.e. the job description, and what do you want? What are you looking for? What are your takeaways? What are your must-haves, et cetera? So instead of just going in more for a transactional kind of admin taking notes and then going out and fishing for those talents, I would say look at bringing industry data, market data to that conversation first. Do the research to say, hey, Denise, I know you were looking for a data analyst. And so what I've done is took some precautions and did some research ahead of time and noticed that certain schools, if you're looking for an entry-level role, paint that scenario, that certain schools graduate a certain amount of data analysts that are really, really strong in the Georgia market or the Seattle market, wherever it is. And I've noticed that some of these students that are coming out of here are pretty strong in their experience based on what you're looking for. Plus, Denise, I also noticed that you've graduated from IE school. And so I did some outreach to their career services team, that department of business or engineering, in touch base with those folks as well, let them know that we have an upcoming opportunity and wanted to see if we can connect with their students or alumni, right? So if you were to bring some information to that conversation initially, and then also say, do you have any market insight, Denise, as well, from your peers as the senior director of business analytics that I should reach out to? So make that exchange more meaningful. This way, you're not just discussing the job description and what they're looking for, but you're really bringing a strategy. And so at the end of that discussion, they're looking at you more as like, okay, this person has really done the research and understands what we're looking for and knows where to look. That kind of condenses the efforts. So if there's any kind of situation to where you're starting to get those pipelines and you're presenting quality candidates, you kind of lessen the blow if everything doesn't go the way it needs to, because you've agreed on a certain strategy in the beginning, but also set the stage like, hey, let's revisit this after 2 weeks and see where we're at.
Okay, a couple of questions come up. This is great information. Number one, going back to the fact that you started out in the agency side and then transitioned to corporate, a lot of us have same thing. I did both, agency and corporate, and then jumped back out into agency. But during my time as an on-site recruiter, I was contract generally. And what we would do, I remember with On Semiconductor, for example, and Motorola way back when, we would set up meetings with the marketing teams and sit in on their marketing events to learn about some of the competitive data that they were sharing with the other business organizations. And they invited us to those meetings, and they were so helpful in being able to create that data to share, or because sometimes the executives couldn't join. But when we would get together, we would be able to share that specific data that was shared with us from the marketing teams. And that was amazingly helpful. Another person I have worked with in the past at Intel made a comment. He said, I think all recruiters, the most successful recruiters are those that started out in agency and came to corporate. Because you've got the sense of urgency.
So the groundwork on the agency side, absolutely love it, right? It's fast paced. It's almost you eat what you kill out there in terms of going after clients, going after candidates. Sometimes certain agencies, it's a dog eat dog fight, but it builds that sense of urgency muscle, right? And so you become more strategic versus just I'm gonna go everywhere. Initially, you probably start off that way, but you start to hone your skill and your niche and become more specific, and you walk away with a game plan, a consistent regimen. And then when you take that to the corporate world, that may shift a bit, right? Because they're not operating in the same sense. Now you've become the focal point for several managers or whatever department or vertical you serve. but still having that sense of urgency, knowing that, hey, this is what I'm planning to do. Here's my strategy. Here's how I continue to leverage my network to gain a stronger pipeline, et cetera. How can we merge with what you're looking for with this strategy so we can come out walking out with the same agreed plan? Because what you don't want to happen, even on the agency side, but on the TA side for sure, what you don't want to happen is your goal is to limit the business from pointing fingers back at you and saying, why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Well, Mr. Manager, we had a discussion 2 weeks ago. We agreed upon a plan. I brought a strategy. I got your okay on that. And then I also said we're going to revisit the production of it and see the outcome over 2 weeks or so. And you agreed to that. And that's giving that hardcore data. I submitted 10. You rejected 8. You interviewed 2. You declined on one of them, and the other one you haven't gotten feedback on. Yet you're still asking for more candidates. And I've reached out to you regarding the 8, and I haven't got clarification as to why you rejected those. And so making sure you're holding your managers accountable as well. And in this way, again, you're eliminating you becoming the scapegoat in those conversations, right? Document all that information. This way, when it rises up and they're saying, hey, what's going on? Well, here's what I have. I have this. I have the conversations. I have the email chain, the efforts we've done, the times we met in person or via Teams, or have you. But that builds that track record and consistency to show we're working, but we're also working on an agreed plan. And so if there's any shift, that's an agreed conversation as well. I'm noticing we're not getting what we need. So here's my suggestion, Denise, on moving to a different market, different strategy. Are you okay with that? Yep. Okay. Again, we'll circle back in 2 weeks. Great.
Now, what about when you are going through those candidates they rejected? Let's talk about those conversations, because sometimes the reasons that they reject the candidates, we're having big discussions right now about upskilling or reskilling employees, right? Or people coming in. If you find somebody who's got more, I had one manager I interviewed last week who said, I'm hiring more on attitude than I am skill, because you can teach skill, but you can't teach attitude. So how are those conversations going then right now on your end?
So I can reference different organizations that I worked for where as long as it's agreed upon, but again, you still need some quantifiable information to say, okay, when you say attitude, what does that mean? Someone super perky, someone super structured, someone point blank, because that's your personality. You like someone very direct. That's great. But what specifically are you looking for in an individual? Right. And even then, those are really scenario based situations. When it even comes with an assessment, it's all scenario based. I may act one way in this situation, but I may act a different way in that scenario. So that's not even a silver bullet to say personality. I'm not going to be happy and cheery all day, every day. That's not life. That's not real. And so there may be times where we're in a heightened situation of deadlines and I'm super stressed. During the interview process, you don't know how I'm going to respond in a stressful situation until I'm in a stressful situation. And so all those things, it's like dating. You start to uncover things as different scenarios poke their head out. So those conversations are great to have. It makes it easier for you as a recruiter to kind of sell the vision, the opportunity to say, hey, here's what we're looking for. Someone who takes initiative, who's very transparent, someone who can be creative at the same time, but diligent and giving feedback, receiving feedback, as well as driving the business or driving the recruiting efforts, so to speak. And so those are all great, but you have to make sure you're landing on both sides, technically, and then the personality ad or the cultural ad, not the fit. If you want the fit, change nothing. If you want to grow, you need add additional types of thought processes and people with different methodologies.
True. So let's talk about then the technical skills part of it. So you have a candidate, and this happens so much, and I'm sure you can relate. We've got candidates who the hiring manager wants 5 to 10 years experience because there's a particular level they want to hire this person in for. But the search has been going on for 6 months, and we just have not found that person who wants to relocate or who is at the salary level that they're looking to pay, whatever. But we have found plenty of people with 3 to 4 years experience, great, potentials. great potentials, right? Education, like you said, they're willing to relocate. They've got, the skills that they're looking for, just not as many years experience. How do we sell that then as a talent advisor?
So there's a number of issues that can come from that, or the cause for why the position is open for that. And as you were saying that, Denise, the first thing that came to mind would be, one, is the recruitment team providing enough data around the why? And then two, is upper management too rigid in their thinking and saying, nope, continue to find the square peg for the round hole. So if that's happening, if that's the first process of happening, then you're consistently going to bump heads. And one of two things are going to happen. That recruiting team is going to get replaced, or they're just going to exit and saying, hey, you guys are not even open to changing strategies, increasing compensation, offering different benefits package to draw a specific type of talent, because this is what the market is telling us. And so you have to be kind of use that discernment. It's really kind of also just fact. If you're bringing the right information to say, here's why we're struggling, here's why we're not getting what we're getting. And it also can be just the look of the organization. Do you look pleasing? And from a forward-facing scenario, what's your LinkedIn profile look like as a business? What postings are you putting out there? Are you showing up as a company that's attractive to this type of talent? Because if it's a top tier talent, you need to be a top tier organization in some form or fashion that's going to attract them. So those are conversations that you would have hopefully initially. But again, if it's not a biweekly or a monthly, to saying, hey, we're struggling, here's what I'm bringing to the table in terms of, again, data to show where we're falling short. Do we have room, i.e. director, VP, to make these changes to make us more competitive and attractive in the market?
What about the LinkedIn 2.0, they used to call it, where you sit down with the manager and you actually do the search with them so they can actually visually see the pipeline that's available for a particular role?
Yeah, that's a great way to do that too. So if you don't do it prior to and just saying, hey, here's the LinkedIn recruiter search that I've done based on the skill set region, because maybe we don't offer relocation, so we want to stay close to home, or we do offer relocation. And so we can show them this is what the available market shows: 400 people from a senior manager level, or tier 2 level, whatever that skill set is that they're targeting. Then if they say, yep, looks good, and then you just start to put together your campaign and reach out to those folks. And again, follow up to sharing information. And we all know the recruiting game is the same. It hasn't changed in 50 plus years. Is that recruiter chases candidate says yes or no, and then the conversation happens. But again, it's the twofold, where I'm not saying all companies do that. I don't have a crystal ball, but companies need to know, do I look the part of what I'm trying to attract? And if I don't, am I making it harder for my TA team? Because most managers who've not stepped into the role of a recruiter or HR don't know the process. They're assuming post, they'll apply, I'll get them in the seat in 2 weeks. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. And so you have to educate them. That's why the transition to a business partner does what? I'm your equal here in terms of what we're looking for. This is my area of expertise, i.e. manager. Your area is production. My area is talent acquisition. Trust that I will bring you enough information to make sure we're making an informed decision. And so as I give you that target search, again, let's agree upon this. You're getting that verbal plus maybe documented agreement. So this way you're saving yourselves, right? Any event that it's not going the way you want it to go. But as long as you two are in step, this way it's an easier sell for them to say, nope, Orlando or Denise has been bringing me information on time, biweekly candidate updates. And so as the manager, you get them to advocate to say, hey, I think it's time we make a change, either in lowering the expectation of this role or increasing the budget to attract what we're looking to attract, versus you trying to pitch it. You've now built an advocate.
So let's talk about increasing the budget.
Yeah.
That can be a climb. No,
Yeah.
seriously. So let's say let's go with that scenario, because that's kind of your next step as a talent advisor. You've checked all these boxes, and they still want somebody with 7 years experience who's going to be kind of in a manager title, or have a manager title, or a project manager role, or leadership of some sort. and they just really need that expertise, but they don't want to pay market rates.
So you have to have those conversations again as if you're a real leader in the organization to say, okay, here's what we're not doing. Here's what you're not unable to do or maybe not wanting to do. Is there anyone internally that we can fill this role with? Right. That's what all should be a part of the first conversation. Is there anyone that you can move up where the increase in budget is minimal or doesn't exceed the bandwidth of the department? So anyone in that pipeline, can you consider that? Are we looking at that? Is that an option? And if that answer is no, again, depending on the hierarchy of your organization, it's really just around continuing to bring that data and search efforts. It can be frustrating. It could be frustrating a lot if you continue to bump heads and he or she manager is not moving or budging. Again, that's why I repeat myself is that you have to get the buy-in in the agreement so it's documented. This way, when that manager may say, all right, Joe is not producing, it's been open 2 months now, and what's going on? What happens? Hey, what's the conversation? Come and talk with me. Why is this manager reaching out to your manager saying you haven't been producing? Well, let's look at this. Oh, I see the problem. Then it escalates to the next level at that point, right? And then is that manager the issue? Why are they rejecting so many candidates? Maybe that's an education piece to where now management needs training, how to identify good candidates and making sure we're maximizing the amount of interviews as possible. We're not just rejecting simply off paper. And I think one of the processes you can do is one of the platforms I've used, it was part of implementing was Lever, that ATS system. And so in that system, it triggered you can set up the interview process and you move it along as each manager has a conversation, but the process did not move along until the manager gave feedback. And so you can go on the system and check, hey, this interview came in on Friday of last week. They met with 3 people. It's stuck at the second manager for feedback. This is hurting your SLA turnaround time. Hey, Mr. Manager or Mrs. Manager, you haven't yet give your thoughts. So once they give their thoughts and feedback, it triggers and notifies the next manager, please put your thoughts and notes and feedback in there as well. And so that was one of the cool things within that system. And that keeps everyone accountable. You must give me feedback. And then as a recruiter, if that feedback, you don't deem it to be valid, challenge it. Go back to that manager. Why do you feel this way? Right? Why do you feel that way? Is it something that's trainable, to your point earlier? Or is it something that it's a must have? Let's collectively get with all 3 people who've interviewed and make a decision. So this is not lingering, or we're misjudging the assignment of hiring a good candidate for maybe something that's not as quantifiable. But again, that can be developed in the process.
I love that. What about training the managers then? Let's talk about stepping back here before we even have our talent strategy meeting with the hiring manager. What training has he or she had to qualify for a search? See what I'm saying?
For
In other words, I recall several years ago, I had a hiring manager who was working for one of our electronics companies. And he was part of the interview process. There were like 3 interviews. And he shows up wearing a torn, raggedy Rolling Stones t-shirt. We had a discussion with him afterwards because the candidates were showing up all dressed up. And this guy shows up like he just came out of a lab. So at that point, we decided we need to start training our hiring teams on how to interview before they even step into the box, right? How to present their own eye contact, because a lot of times people, especially when you're talking about technical experts, they're technical experts, but they're not people experts, right? So what kind of programs are we going to put them through to get them ready for that, for the role of as an interviewer or as a hiring leader?
Yeah, most hiring managers, as you know, Denise, don't know how to interview. It's a small margin of folks percentage. And again, it sounds like I'm throwing the blanket all across America, but you see that they're not really skilled at interviewing, especially when it's more of a free flowing style of interview. They get to ask their own questions, and all they're referencing is the resume and speaking to the job and expectations, et cetera. My experience when I worked at Amazon, I was part of the interviewing team there, and it was very, very structured, right? So Amazon set up to where they had their core principles, whether it was 4 or 5 core principles, and each manager had a set of questions to speak to those core principles. So there was no duality in questions, and they were all scenario based. And the recruiter said, here's how the interview is going to go. It's all going to be behavioral based questions. Tell me about a time X. Tell me when you did Y. And so the candidate was super prepped and ready, which helped me land the job. The thing, and they did too, to the efficiency, is made it one day. And so all managers, whether you were skilled at interviewing or not, you were literally given a paper with questions to ask from your core competencies. And then after that, you were rated upon that. And so there was no time for a manager to kind of veer off left, veer off right. It was, hey, you need to get through some of these questions. You have it more of a conversation, not an interrogation, but you were guided in that conversation. And this way, it was consistency across the board. So I would say managers and companies to adopt that kind of process, figure out what your core competencies are in your organization, regardless of skill set, whether they're technical or non-technical support roles. Everyone gets the same type of interview, and every manager gets a core set of questions to ask, different from each other. And this way you have a consistent, non-biased process going through the organization.
Perfect. What about something you just said popped a question to my head about panel interviews versus one-on-one interviews. And when we do have that team that's ready to go, they know which questions they're going to ask, but let's say they want to do a panel interview. How do you feel about panel interviews versus one-on-one?
I'm fine with panel interviews if that's the only interview process. Or maybe that's the initial process, and then the next step is with the final person, and that's it. But if that's part of a 4-tier process, I think that's too much, right? So, and as a TA person, to becoming a business partner, you can guide that as guidance to the organization, saying, hey, what we're seeing in the market, again, is candidates are not hanging in there even by interview 3 because it's too long. It's 2 to 3 weeks in between each step. And by then they've lost interest. Again, if you're trying to target the top tier candidates, which every candidate, or should I say each company is doing, they want a more efficient and smooth process. They're ready to go. They're ready to interview with 2 to 3 steps the most and get it done, right? And so if you need a panel, then a follow-up, then another follow-up, and then you're on the 4th stage, there's inefficiency in your company's thinking on the role and how you want to do things. You don't need that many touch points. Either way, it's not 100% that person is going to work out if you put them through 1 or 20. So it's a gamble. And I think it's just lack of clarity in how their efficiency in the interview process. But as a TA professional, Denise, you need to step in and saying, hey, this is way too long. We're losing people. Here's the feedback.
Well, and again, though, too, you mentioned at the very beginning when we're doing our initial conversations, our talent strategy meeting, that has to be discussed. What's our interview process going to be? They say that they want 8 people in the organization. So let's role play that. You're the hiring manager, and I say to you, okay, so we have 5 candidates that you want to interview. 2 of them may be getting offers within the next 2 weeks, and those are kind of your more high potential candidates. So what does the interview process look like? You say you want to have a panel interview of 4, and then you want to do 2 other interviews, and then you want the general manager of the organization to be the last person. Okay, why do we need a general manager, right, to bless this hire? I mean, if the general manager has hired his successor or his director or manager, whatever, to take the lead on this search, then why do you have to have so many signatures on the hire? And why do you have to have so many interviews? So let's have that discussion.
Yeah, so I would say I would open it up with that. Is that needed right now at this time, Denise, to have this many touch points? Is this been historically the same way we've hired across the board for years? Assuming I'm new to the organization or whatever, or that manager has at least been there longer. And if they say no, then the next way I would say, okay, Well, if we don't have to have this many touch points, what I need you to do is review the top decision makers out of that group. Let's collectively pull them together. It's fine if you still want to have a panel and then a second conversation after that. No problem. But can we get that within 48 hours so we can get a panel on Monday and the next interview Tuesday, or if not that same day, so by Wednesday we have a decision, yes or no. Because again, Susan has a potential offer on the table and she's willing to hold off until Thursday to give feedback. Can we do that? Can we speed? Because the goal here is speed to hire. And if not, then okay, we do run the risk of losing her. I just want to make sure you understand that. So it's clear. Okay, I'm gonna send you an email to follow up and confirm this conversation. If you can respond back knowing that, then that's great. The other way is, oh yeah, we have to have this mini process. Same thing. All right, we need to condense this then. We need to condense the time. Again, let's have everybody on one call at one time on Tuesday. She's available at 1 p.m. Then I need the GM to be available by 4 p.m. that same day. If we can get this done, and I think we can score a hire here with this person. Does that sound like a plan we can execute? Yes. Okay. I'm going to send you an email, confirm this, get all the invites out, get the calendar date set up. Because you need that partnership in that documentation to say, in the event it failed, well, we agreed upon the plan. Here was my suggestion. You agreed upon it. I told you what the risks were. And again, you said yes or no to it. And we move forward with this agreed plan. So you're CYA for sure, but you're still bringing that information. And you can bring that data saying candidates don't even get through applications if it's too lengthy. What makes you think they're going to get through an interview process if it's too long as well? And so it's the same thing. You have to hit them between the eyes and saying, my expert advice is this. I'm talking with the candidate. I know where they are. They like what we offer, et cetera, but we need to move fast and we need to be efficient.
The other piece too is if they agree to it, and let's say that the GM still wants to be part of the decision-making process, but then all of a sudden the GM gets a call during the interview process saying that he has to step into another meeting, right? And now the process is broken. So now you're going to have to go back to the hiring manager and say, all right, he's out of the loop. You either put somebody else in to make that final decision, or we have to cut him out and make the decision based on the people that have interviewed, right? So we need to have that discussion first too, before we even, I think we need to have those discussions before we even start the search process. Make sure we've checked every single scenario and every single box. Otherwise they'll push back, right? Well, no, Joe said he really wants to be part of that interview process. Well, Joe was on the calendar and I don't know, he's not there. And this candidate, we're looking at another offer that she's going to get. You guys really want to hire her.
And that's
So,
happened.
yeah.
That's happened. And I think that's great that you brought that up, because the other piece is like, I got to know if she's even excited to even take an offer, if we can present an offer now that the GM cut the interview short. Like, that's the GM's not higher than the candidate. You're equal parties. Their scheduler is not more important than the candidates. And so there has to be an even playing field. And so you immediately follow up the candidate to get that feedback first as a recruiter, to saying, oh, how'd the interview go? Oh, such and such had to bolt out of the conversation early. Okay. Are you still interested? How far did you get in the conversation? What do you think? If they're still like, yeah, if we can still move to an opportunity and an offer, great. Then I would take that as fire ammunition to say, we need to make a decision now. Here's what happened. You probably didn't even know this happened, because I didn't until I reached out to the candidate. But the 3 or 4 people who met with Susan before, we need to make a decision now. And you need to reach out to the GM and say, hey, we understand what just happened, but we need to move forward, because this person is about to has to return a yes or no to the other offer by tomorrow. And if we drag our feet, we're going to lose them. We have no one else, or we're going to second or third tier candidates, or the search starts all over again. Right. So there has to be that sense of urgency to press the manager press the next level to get it through the door. You need an answer ASAP. Yeah.
And if we have a manager or an executive who insists on being part of the decision-making process, if he or she bags out of more than one interview, how do we remove that executive from the panel, from the interview process?
Yeah. Same.
Because
I was going to say same.
I mean, completely remove him.
Same process. Well,
her.
that may be tough, but I think to that point, you make that scenario in saying, hey, if IEVP can't make it or consistently backs out, we need to be prepared to move forward and let them know that they're comfortable. They need to trust your decision. You're the one hiring for this role on your team. And so
Exactly.
we need to make sure that they're trusting your decision. And if that's not happening, then I think that's a bigger issue. If they need that much oversight, they hired you, they empowered you to build your team or whatever. It's a backfill or whatever have you. It's a new opening and they need to trust you. And so we need to make sure that we can move as quickly as possible if they are unable to participate for whatever reason. We can't keep rescheduling and rescheduling, especially with a VP. How hard that is, right? To get them on the calendar, it could be 2 weeks between each opportunity. We don't have that kind
And
of
we've all
time.
had
Yep.
that.
We don't have that kind of time.
We've all had it happen, and it's just frustrating as heck. And one of my questions is, all right, if you can't make it, who's going to be able to step into your place to do this final interview? You need a backup. Otherwise, if you don't show up, like you said, it could affect the outcome of the interviews. But at least if you put somebody else in, you're showing good faith effort that you've got another person then who's going to step in on your behalf to do that final
Yep.
interview.
Multiple touch points for sure. Absolutely.
Multiple, right, exactly. So you have one of your podcasts was missing links to executive presence. So is this a good time to talk about that? So, and whoever the hiring managers are that are listening to this conversation, we're not trying to beat you up here. But we are trying to establish just a good game plan here as we move forward with interviews because everyone's talking about the candidate experience. Okay, this is the ultimate candidate experience, right? But it ties in also with following a plan, letting us participate as your business partner. I love what LinkedIn said one time. There was a speaker at a workshop at one of the big LinkedIn conferences, and the guy said, now remember, when you get a new job order or new requisition to work on for one of your hiring teams, make sure that they understand they can't just wad it up and throw it over the wall to you and then walk away. Your first job as that talent advisor is to let them know you are the talent advisor, but it is their requisition. This is their hire. And just being able to remind them kindly along the way, this is your hire. This is impacting your team. This is impacting the revenue coming from your department. So let's just keep that in mind. I'm here to partner with you, but we have to stay in step with each other, right? So what are some of the other missing links to the executive presence?
So if I recall that episode, they were talking more about how that leader, executive leader shows up, how they're empowering their team, and really making sure that they're garnering the respect, not just because of title, but because of action and being more people forward. And so it's not always about bottom line production. I know we're in an organization, revenue, and there's stakeholders and board members and investors to report to if you're a public company. But still, if you drive people, people will drive process, and then you'll have the profits and the success you need. And so those type of leaders need to be more empathetic, understanding life cycles have changed over the past several, decades. And so people are more in tune with health and wellness. Mental health is the big thing. And so those type of executive presence is not just from a strategic vision, leadership. I can set the plan and drive production or whatever it is, drive the mission, but how are you leveraging talent? How are you supporting your team from growth, internal mobility opportunities, technology, so they become more efficient as well? And so all these different nuances and categories culminates kind of a better executive presence for that individual. Because again, it's just because you've reached that level doesn't mean you're a great people leader. There'll be cases you reach that level because of just work and performance. But then when it comes time to lead a big organization, are these people following you based on title or based on the trust and value that you are as a leader and you pouring back into your team?
Yeah. Well, and that's really good. I like that. And so let's talk about that for a minute. So, when we discussed it briefly a while ago, managers or executives who aren't people. They're driven, they're business people, they have a great eye on what the company needs to succeed, but man, they're just not people. So, how do we work around that kind of scenario, because we have it not just at the executive level, but also people who get promoted into manager and director roles. Same thing. You have different personalities, right? How are we going to adjust then for people and allow them to be who they are? But then who else are we going to work with outside of that particular person or whatnot in order to provide a good candidate experience or to have a good recruiter experience, right? Or talent advisor experience. One of the things I think that's been helpful for me recently, I have one company that we're working for that we have a really tough leader, and he's really tough. But the HR director has stepped in and he has said, "Okay, let me handle him." So you almost like maybe need uh, a game plan that way. I guess I think about football. I'm not even a football person, but I just think about that second string coming in to help out. But yeah, he has stepped in and said, "All right, I'm going to take care of this guy. You guys focus on XYZ, and I'm going to give you a different leader to work with who can kind of take part then of the interview process, work with the candidates, because this guy is great at developing business, but he's not great at interviews."
Yeah, so that's called an audible in essence. Yeah, audible. So it's an immediate change of plan in the midst of the plan. So you have one strategy to go first, to move forward with first, and so to paint it in the football analogy, you could be on the field and you're going to do a slant right pass, whatever, and then you see how the defense is set up, and you're like, you know what, we're going to do a run play, and so the quarterback understands the landscape, sees what's happening, what's the formation, and then there's telling to the team, hey, we're calling it a different play because they see what's about to happen. Meaning they're already on to their game plan. We say, okay, we got to call the audible. We have to switch it up. And so in business, the same way, if we have the strategy and we already know how this manager is going to react or be a roadblock, you got to have that discernment in relationship. And kudos to the HR director in that having that open communications for whoever leader to go up to them and saying, hey, this person's a roadblock, and for us to execute on our metrics and get these roles filled, we need support. They're in the way. And so great audible call for that HR director to step in and say, I'll handle him or her. And so you all can go ahead and execute what you need to. So that's phenomenal. But that also speaks to a greater thing as well, Denise, and it's really culture from the top down. What's the culture you're trying to develop and grow within the organization? And if that person is a good people leader, just because scenario they may have been the top sales person in the organization doesn't mean they can lead or train or duplicate themselves or put together a plan for other people to follow. And so that leadership team above them needs to know, can this person not only again drive people to drive the process, or is this person just better in the individual contributor role? And so they have to making sure what culture they're trying to build. And if it's just putting people in certain roles because they performed well and you're assigning them team members and they can't lead the team, then you're right. That's not a good culture to kind of survive. And it becomes very toxic at that point.
It does. It really does. And those of us who've been in this business a long time, we have seen these scenarios over and over again. Now, the other piece of it too is, and you mentioned early in our conversation, coming in again into corporate America after having worked in the staffing agency world or as a vendor. When you come in and you're working internally and you are a corporate now recruiter, or you're a corporate leader, TA leader, and then all of a sudden now you've got a hiring team who has been working though with an outside agency, but maybe you want to cut that budget because it's, especially for retained searches. Retained searches are very costly. What are your conversations then to empower your team and be able to give your team more of those higher level positions to work on? And I know some companies actually have created, a lot of companies, in fact, have created executive search uh, teams for their talent acquisition organization. Now, do you have that?
No, so internally, and great question as well. So we do have a team that focuses on a role. It's a good sized team, about 10 folks. We do work with outside agencies, but that's a small list. But I've been in a previous role where I had to do exactly that. Come in, That organization was working with 65 plus agencies in all different departments: IT, finance, marketing, et cetera. And so I had to get with my team, come in, and we scaled that down to about 8 of the top performing ones based on role, the difficulty of the role, within about 60 days. And so we just called back all those contracts and said, we're not going to be working. And then we had meetings with our VP. I explained the situation. She had asked me to do this. And so I had these conversations saying, here's where we are. But I also went around to all those C-level folks who ran the department heads and saying, this is what we're doing based on performance. Who's been the top performing agency for you? Okay, great. We want to make sure that we're limiting the budget. And this is north of $1 million in spend annually for the organization. And so one of the things I was able to do in saying, hey, give us a shot first. Here's the team. Here's the makeup of our experience. I come with this this within my first 60 to 90 days. Give us a shot to fill these roles. If we can't do it within a certain time period, I think it was 30 days, then we start to open up to the agencies. But let us steer those conversations. Let us negotiate those markups and things like that, because I come from this world. And so this way we know we're not being overcharged based on relationships, and they continue to overprice us and gouge income. So if we can control that, we can still have that partnership relationships, and the end goal is to fill the role. So if we can do that, then it's a win-win. And so that was executed, but we were successful at filling north of 100 and some odd roles within that year, from all levels up to executive level. And so we were successful at reducing that spend quite a bit. I would say at least over $1 million we saved the company with that plan and strategy.
I know some companies have even brought in people working for the top level staffing firms, brought them in as contract recruiters to work on their team to try to save that spend, pay them hourly, because that can be very costly.
Absolutely.
But I recall, though, several times where the companies I'm supporting have done that. They'll hire us as contract recruiters to come in and basically work to augment their team, a staff augmentation, they call it. But you've got the hiring managers who are still bringing you resumes from the other agencies they've worked with in the past, right? So, oh my gosh. So it can be a little sticky,
Yeah.
at
Because it
times.
can be really just based off relationships. There was one scenario where we literally thought we couldn't prove it, or nor did we investigate it, but we literally thought that hiring manager might have been getting a kickback because the only resumes they presented was from this one particular agency, and he was pushing hard to get those folks through. And we're like, wait a minute, we have to interview multiple people. And so the VP got involved. The VP of HR was like, hey, stop. Like, we're going to cut this person off completely because we see a track record from you only hiring from these individuals, and we can't do that. And so, but again, there was a high sense of something's going on here. There's no way this one person can funnel you all these people, and and that's all you're hiring from. You're not even open to seeing different candidates coming from different areas from your own internal team to save money. And this person was a VP of finance.
Oh, ouch.
Even
Snap.
more suspicious. It was like, wait a minute, you're costing us the company money. What are you doing? That's your job,
Yeah. As he drives up in his new
right?
Lamborghini because he's getting the kickbacks. Oh, I know. One company we worked for actually had created their own internal, like, little search firm. It was the executives who created it and put some people in charge of it. I don't know what kind of kickbacks they were giving each other, but they made it legit because it was their C-level people who created this little I know. So, I
Can't blame them for that.
but they were above board about it. It's like, yeah, we're gonna. Yeah. I think that they did too bring in 2 or 3 people from the search firms that they like best, and paid them like a base salary plus commissions,
Oh,
things
so
like
they
that. So
pulled them from the agency. Oh,
yeah,
smart. Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
yeah. If you can get them, I mean, a really good agency recruiter is probably not going to leave if they're making, because they're going to make a lot more money on the agency side than on the corporate side typically.
correct. Yep.
So, oh my gosh. So give me some success stories with your how you're working with leaders and whatnot, especially like with Mosaic. What kind of, maybe give 1 or 2 scenarios where you came in and you had like a struggle and
So Mosaic it's an older company, 50 plus years, but they're so open to innovation. And that's one of the things I love is that the team I work with now is we develop what's called kind of a student ambassador program. And so we are asking some of our business leaders to come out on the recruiting efforts. And so even though the primary focus of the TA team is to do the talent pipeline, we're a small team, but we cover a large scope. So again, it's North America. And so with that, we've engaged our leaders to say, hey, we have a host of events that we're doing, career fairs we're attending from across different universities across North America. If you want to come, great. You can come out and support because and we're hyper focused on engineers in that space. And so when I talk about the hands being raised, Denise, these folks are diving in. I'll go. Yes, yes, yes. And so that helps us be in multiple places at the same time. It brings better brand awareness. And so as we're speaking to that population of young engineering students, they're seeing themselves based on the representation we're bringing to those career events, which is traditional in essence, but it's even more so when even from a D&I perspective. Mosaic is huge at making sure we still have a D&I initiative, a global initiative. And so that's always key for us too, as we look across the landscape of hiring. But it's great to know again that the business is saying, hey, TA team, we're with you. Wherever you need us, let us know. We'll go out there. We'll partner with you. We'll sell the organization because we've been in it as engineers through the pipeline. And these are folks that have been with the company 10, 15, 20 years. And so they have a history and knowledge of the organization that we as TA team may not have. And so that's always great when they can go out and talk the tech talk, and we'll talk some of the transactional stuff in terms of processes and what does the interview process look like and the opportunities within Mosaic. And so that's yielded some great success with partnerships with universities and community partners and the like.
That is fabulous. They are your key brand ambassadors, especially with the longevity with the company.
Absolutely.
That is fabulous. Let's talk about DEI for a second, because that's big in the news right now, that it might be going away or that might be tabled or whatnot. So
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of companies, I think most recently, I think Walmart even, I think I've seen that on LinkedIn. Walmart dropped their D&I initiative. And so as you're seeing that go around big companies. And so, and that's dangerous because when you see massive global companies like that do it, it can sometimes cause a trickle effect for smaller companies. It's like, okay, if Walmart and whoever is doing it, we don't need to do it. Great. But thankfully, Mosaic has the foresight to know through diversity creates better opportunities and different thought processes and just overall better production of the organization. And so with that, there's 6 major categories that we're focused on in making sure we're bringing the workforce up to 30% within those categories. And that's veterans, diverse ability, generation, pride, women, and race and heritage. And so with how do we get the global workforce up to a 30% across each category by 2030? And this is stuff you can easily see on our website. So it's public knowledge. And so it's great to know that the executive team, CEO, all through his team, that's the mission, right? That's the focus. And it's talked about on a consistent basis. And so that's a direct impact in my efforts and my people leader and my partners that I work with. How do we drive talent, but not only just talent, but diverse talent so we can meet these goals by 2030? And so it's a big lift for sure. It's all those things we talked about earlier, making sure we're competitive, et cetera. How do we look to in comparison to, right, different markets, different industries, different employers? But it's great, again, to know that they're still forging ahead to say, nope, we see the vision and the value of diverse of thought, background, experience, ethnicity, et cetera, to keep the doors in the mission of what Mosaic does going forward.
no, that is fabulous. I am so happy to hear that. And I hope that other companies will follow suit, because it is scary to hear that we're going to be dropped, especially after working all these years to build these initiatives and then to have them put on a back burner for what and why? Why put them on a back burner? There's no reason for it.
And
So,
I think that's eye opening because what that really tells is these organizations that are dropping it were really never for it in the beginning. So since the George Floyd murder, that's what sparked all those different D&I openings. Like literally the next day, LinkedIn was flooded with D&I opportunities. And so that's like those companies that are dismantling it were really in a scenario of checking a box, and it wasn't the main focus. They were like, okay, how do we be compliant so we don't get trashed or whatever the main case may be. But now the trickle effect of that is those diverse people within those organizations may feel like, hey, this may no longer be the company for me if they're taking this initiative away.
That is incredible. Plus, too, you're talking about doing it on a global scale.
Yes,
So, I mean, DEI initiatives in other regions have different philosophies, they have different goals than they do here in the United States. So you're kind of upsetting a much bigger apple cart talking about tabling the DEI programs.
correct.
I think that it's interesting. There was a leader in Europe who was kind of bragging that, oh, we're here in Europe and we're still moving forward DEI and the US isn't. And I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, it's like really kind of uh going to give us a bad reputation if we're not keeping up with the rest of the world, right? We need to, because again, a lot of companies are global, right? Briefly describe what it is that Mosaic does. I just love what your company
Yeah,
does.
absolutely. So the tagline for us is we help the world grow the food it needs. And so Mosaic is a leading producer of two main minerals, phosphate and potash, which is a natural mineral that we mine for. We're a mining company within the agricultural space. And so the minerals get converted into fertilizer, and then those products are sold to the farmers across the globe to grow the crops and the food we eat. And so we ship to about 42 countries, maybe a little more, but that's the global impact. And a lot of people don't know who Mosaic is. They've been around for decades, had some changing coming into Mosaic title, but it was a conglomerate of different organizations. But for the most part, if you think about the footprint and the impact of what we do, and I think this is also on the website as well, if Mosaic was not around anymore, you're talking a large portion of the world, if not 50% of the world, unable to produce crops. And so that's a major impact when you think about cost, food hitting to the supermarkets and what that looks like. Mosaic is a massive player in the world in terms of what we do. And so when you think about mission and impact with the organization, I don't know any other company that has that type of impact other than competitors that literally feed the world. And so
Literally.
literally, it's a literal statement.
So with phosphate and potash, what does it do to the fertilizer?
That's a great engineering question. So I'm not that
I'm just
well
curious.
versed
I
in
mean,
that.
it's a unique
Yeah,
company.
and so it's
Yeah.
definitely when you think about what we do, those are the core products that are it's then blended and it's mixed with other products to give you the fertilizer for large crops. But also if you were going to a Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's and buy fertilizer for your grass, two of our products are in those packages as well. So we're pretty much everywhere in that sense. So there's three core products. I think it's P and K. I forgot the technical term for it, but you'll never see Mosaic label on stuff like that. We do, again, we're the main core products in some of that, but again, it's always a blended mix what we do when we ship it out. But we, again, a lot of it's done. Phosphate is done here locally in Florida, and then potash for the core is Canada and another location there. And so we own pretty much probably the second largest locations, if not the first, depending on other countries, phosphate or potash mining operations. And so with that, again, the global impact of what we do is bar none.
That is huge. That's amazing. And what is it? Mosaic.com, right? Or is it mosaiccorp.com?
Mosaic Co. So MOSAICCO.com.
Great stuff. How many leaders are you working with right now?
Oof. Uh, if I were to put a number on it, I would probably tell you because I lead our co-op program across three core areas: Saskatchewan, Canada, Louisiana, and Florida. And so there's different mining locations there. And so it's a number of anywhere from a minimum of 15 plus on the co-op side. And then internally, when it comes to strategy, our HR business partners. And then from the D&I perspective, we have D&I leaders across the organization. So with the team I'm on, we probably are in contact with easily 30 plus leaders on any given strategy.
Fabulous. And that's globally.
Yeah. And so we're also partnered with our Brazilian operations as well, making sure we're trying to globalize processes and best practices. And so a lot of our senior managers and above are from the production and what we do contact. But in my role, yes, we still coordinate with Brazil to touch base and see how we can share best practices across the waters.
That's fabulous. I mean, you guys are living DEI, really. I mean, seriously. So good for you. And if somebody wants to follow your Career Talks podcast,
Yeah, so you can check it out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Still growing the YouTube on that side, but you can go to YouTube as well. But you can always connect with me on LinkedIn and see live episodes every Monday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a weekly basis.
and you said your podcast is global as well.
Yeah, it's being reached across 16 countries. Yes.
Orlando, thank you so much. I think we've covered quite a bit today. So thank you. More than I expected.
Absolutely. It
We
was
kind of dived
a
into
great
it.
conversation.
Yeah, but
Denise.
that's the way it works.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.